They laughed when they saw me. Not out loud at first, but in those quiet, knowing chuckles people share when they think you don't belong. She looks like our maid, not his mother. That was the moment I realized respect isn't given. It's earned back with silence and power. My name is Olivia Anderson, and I never thought I'd live to see the day my own son would stand quietly beside the people who mocked me. Before I tell you what happened, tell me. Where are you watching from? I always love knowing where my stories reach. All right. Let me take you back to the day I met my son's new family. The day everything changed. I still remember the morning sunlight streaming through my kitchen window. I had woken up early, heart full of nervous pride. My son, Michael, was introducing me to his fiancée's family that evening. Her name was Vanessa Grant, and from the way he spoke about her, "She's graceful, Mom, and her family's into real estate and philanthropy." I could tell she came from money, but I wasn't intimidated. I ironed my best dress, a pale lavender one with tiny white buttons down the front. It wasn't new, but it was clean and simple. I tied my hair back neatly, slipped on pearl earrings that had belonged to my mother, and whispered a small prayer before heading out. When I arrived at their mansion, I froze for a moment. The driveway alone was longer than my entire street. Marble steps led up to towering doors with golden handles. 2 men in suits greeted me like I was there to deliver a package. I smiled anyway. "Good evening," I said softly, clutching the small box of homemade lemon bars I'd baked that morning. "I'm Olivia, Michael's mother." One of the men nodded politely. "Of course. Right this way, ma'am." Inside, it felt like walking into another world. The chandeliers sparkled like frozen stars, and the air smelled faintly of roses and polished silver. Vanessa's mother approached me first, elegant, poised, and wearing the kind of diamonds you only see on magazine covers. "Oh," she exclaimed with a rehearsed smile, "you must be Michael's mother." I extended my hand. "Yes, ma'am. It's lovely to meet you." She looked at my hand before taking it, a brief touch, cold as glass. Her eyes swept over my dress, my shoes, the little gift box I held. "How thoughtful," she said, then called over her shoulder, "Vanessa, dear, your future mother-in-law is here." That word, mother-in-law, felt so warm when she said it, but the warmth didn't last. Vanessa appeared moments later in a shimmering gold gown that caught every bit of light. Her hair was perfect, her smile poised. "Hi, Mrs. Anderson," she chirped, leaning in for a quick air kiss. "You look sweet. Sweet. Not elegant. Not beautiful. Just sweet." As I followed her to the dining hall, I could feel eyes on me. Glances traded. Across crystal glasses, I heard snippets of whispers. "That's her? I thought she was the help." And then, clear as day, a woman at the far end chuckled and said, "She looks like our maid, not his mother." The words hit me like ice water. For a moment, I just stood there, frozen in the middle of that glittering room, clutching my lemon bars like a shield. My son laughed awkwardly, pretending not to hear. Vanessa's father cleared his throat and said something about taking our seats. I took a deep breath and forced a smile. "Excuse me, could I help bring anything to the table?" I asked gently, trying to steady my voice. Vanessa laughed. "Oh, no. We have staff for that," she said lightly, turning to her friends. They laughed too. Dinner went on in a blur. Every joke, every smirk felt like a small cut. I nodded, smiled when spoken to, and answered politely. But inside, my heart was trembling. When dessert came, I quietly opened my lemon bars and offered them. "These are homemade," I said, hoping maybe kindness could soften the edges. No one took one. Not even my son. That night, I went home and sat at my kitchen table, the silence pressing around me. I looked at my hands, the same hands that had raised him, fed him, paid his tuition by working 2 shifts at the diner, and now those same hands weren't even worthy to be shaken by his wife's family. I didn't cry. I just sat there for a long while, listening to the refrigerator hum and the clock tick, thinking about the look in his eyes, that mixture of shame and fear. I didn't know it then, but that dinner wasn't just an insult. It was a warning, a sign that my son had stepped into a world that had no place for the woman who raised him, and I was going to find out just how deep that world went. After that dinner, something inside me shifted, not out of anger, but out of realization. You know that moment when your child smiles at you, but his eyes tell a different story? That's what I saw in Michael. It was the look of a man torn between pride and embarrassment, and I couldn't tell which one hurt more. A week passed before I heard from him. I told myself he was busy, planning the wedding, adjusting to new responsibilities. But deep down, I felt the quiet growing between us. He used to call every evening just to ask, "How was work today, Mom?" Now my phone stayed silent for days. When I finally called, Vanessa answered. Her tone was polite, but cool. "Oh, hi, Mrs. Anderson. Michael's in a meeting right now. I'll tell him you called." She didn't. When he did return my call a few days later, his voice was light, practiced. "Hey, Mom, sorry, things are crazy busy here." I smiled through the phone. "I understand, honey. I just wanted to check in. I haven't seen you in a while." "Yeah," he said quickly. "Vanessa's parents are introducing us to some business partners this week. They think it's good for me to get exposure to their network." The words felt foreign coming from him. Network, exposure, partners. He used to talk about customers, community, hard work. Now it was strategy and connections. I still worked part-time at my diner, the same one that had paid for his college. The locals loved it. The place smelled of coffee, cinnamon rolls, and the comfort of small talk. But lately, I caught myself watching the door, half hoping he'd surprise me like he used to. He didn't. Then one afternoon, a familiar car pulled up outside. Not his, but Vanessa's silver SUV. She walked in, heels clicking on the tiled floor like she owned the place. Heads turned. "Vanessa," I greeted, genuinely surprised. "What a nice surprise." She smiled, too wide, too sweet. "Oh, I just wanted to grab something quick. Michael told me you make the best pies in town." Her tone dripped with politeness, the kind that hides mockery behind sugar. She ordered 2 coffees and a slice of pie, then looked around. "It's cozy here. Kind of old-fashioned, don't you think?" I nodded. "That's what people like about it. It reminds them of home." "Right," she said, sipping her coffee. "Homey." When she left, she didn't say goodbye, just a faint wave, like a queen acknowledging a servant. I stood there wiping the same counter over and over, trying not to feel small. Weeks turned into months. Their wedding came and went, a grand affair I wasn't really part of. They sent me a seat assignment that placed me 3 tables away from them. I clapped when they kissed, smiled when cameras turned my way, and cried quietly when they didn't. After the honeymoon, I invited them for dinner at my house. A simple meal, just family. Vanessa smiled politely and said, "Oh, that's sweet, but we're on a diet right now." Diet. That word sounded like a wall. When Michael dropped by alone a few weeks later, he stood in the doorway like a visitor, glancing around as if my small house suddenly embarrassed him. "Mom, you should really think about selling this place," he said. "You could move closer to us, maybe get something more modern." I smiled sadly. "This house raised you, son. It's not modern, but it's home." He looked away, murmuring, "Vanessa just thinks—" "I know what Vanessa thinks," I interrupted softly. "I was young once, too." He laughed awkwardly, hugged me, and left before the coffee even cooled. One night, while closing the diner, I overheard 2 of my regulars talking about the Grant family. "Did you hear?" one whispered. "They're expanding again. Big project coming up. Heard they're looking for investors." "Investors?" the other said. "That family doesn't run out of money." "Guess even the rich need funding," the first replied. That word, funding, stuck in my mind. Because 2 years earlier, when I retired and sold half of the diner, I had quietly started a small charitable foundation in my late husband's name. It helped fund community housing and women-owned businesses. And lately, I'd been approached by a company, Grant Developments, for a partnership. Grant. The same name as Vanessa's family. I remember standing there behind the counter, rag in hand, the hum of the coffee machine filling the silence. I smiled to myself. Small, quiet, but steady. Because maybe the world wasn't as small as they thought. Maybe, just maybe, I wasn't done being underestimated yet. A few weeks later, I received a cream-colored envelope with gold trimming, the kind that feels expensive even before you open it. Inside was a handwritten note, or at least a note designed to look handwritten. Mrs. Anderson, we'd be delighted if you could join us for our upcoming Investor Appreciation Dinner, hosted by Grant Developments. Warmly, Harold and Margaret Grant. I stared at it for a long moment, then chuckled under my breath. Investor Dinner. Grant Developments. The same company that had sent my foundation a proposal only months ago. The same last name as my daughter-in-law's family. I wondered if they had any idea who I was, or if this was just fate playing a quiet joke. That evening, I took extra care dressing. I didn't want to look fancy, just put together. A deep blue dress, simple pearl earrings, my gray hair in a low bun. I looked at myself in the mirror and said softly, "Olivia, you walk in there as yourself. No apologies." When I arrived, the valet hesitated for just a second before taking my car keys, the kind of pause people make when they can't tell if you're attending or working the event. Inside, the hall shimmered with wealth. Chandeliers, champagne, and soft jazz humming in the background. People were laughing, shaking hands, greeting one another like they'd been born with confidence stitched into their suits. I found my table near the back. A few couples smiled politely, but their eyes moved past me almost instantly, scanning the room for more useful company. Then I heard Vanessa's voice, bright, sharp, like the clink of glass. "Oh, there she is, Michael's mom." Heads turned. She floated toward me in a silver gown, every move rehearsed. Michael followed a step behind her, looking handsome but tense. "Mom," he said with forced cheer, "glad you could make it." Before I could reply, Vanessa leaned in and whispered, "Try to just enjoy the dinner, okay? No business talk tonight. This is kind of a professional crowd." Her words dripped sugar, but they burned all the same. I smiled. "Don't worry, dear. I'll be on my best behavior." Dinner began with speeches. Harold Grant, her father, stood at the podium, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and the booming confidence of someone used to being listened to. He talked about innovation, progress, legacy, all the words that sound noble but usually mean money. I listened quietly, sipping water when he mentioned a name that made my stomach tighten. And of course, we're deeply grateful to our upcoming partners, the Anderson Community Foundation, for their faith in our next project. There it was, my foundation, my name. He didn't look at me, didn't know I was sitting right there in his audience. I folded my napkin slowly, pretending to listen as applause filled the room. Vanessa smiled proudly at the announcement, completely unaware of what she'd just revealed. I caught Michael's eye, and for a brief second he looked confused, like something clicked in his mind but didn't fully register yet. Later, when dessert was served, the conversation around me turned into polite chaos, half gossip, half bragging. "Oh, the Anderson Foundation?" one man at the table said. "Small group, right? Surprised they're involved with the grants." A woman chuckled. "Maybe it's a charity write-off. You know how these things go." They laughed. Not cruelly this time, but dismissively, the kind of laughter that makes you invisible. I excused myself and walked toward the balcony for some air. The night was cool, the city lights stretching endlessly. Inside, I could hear Vanessa's bright voice mingling with the others. Our Maid, small diner, humble beginnings. They thought I couldn't hear, but I did. And instead of anger, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Because now I wasn't just the mother-in-law they mocked. I was the silent investor behind the very company that fed their pride. The irony was so sharp, it almost made me smile. When I returned to the table, Harold Grant was stepping away to answer a call. His face changed mid-conversation, his expression tightening. He looked across the room at me, eyes narrowing with realization. He ended the call quickly, straightened his tie, and walked directly toward me. "Mrs. Anderson," he said, voice low, "would you mind if we spoke privately for a moment?" The room hushed without meaning to. Vanessa looked from her father to me, confused, and that's when I knew the masks were about to fall. Harold Grant's expression told me everything before he even opened his mouth. The charming, confident businessman I'd watched command a room now looked like a man trying to hold a collapsing wall upright. "Mrs. Anderson," he said again, softer this time, "could we speak in my office?" I smiled gently. "Of course." The entire table had gone silent. Even the soft jazz in the background felt quieter. Vanessa's smile faltered. Michael stood halfway out of his chair, unsure what was happening. I followed Harold through a pair of tall wooden doors into a smaller, dimly lit office lined with books and framed newspaper articles. The door shut behind us with a quiet click. He took a breath. "I just got off the phone with my assistant," he began, voice measured but uneasy. "She confirmed something surprising." "Oh?" I tilted my head, polite as ever. "She says the Anderson Community Foundation is finalizing a substantial partnership with Grant Developments. The papers are in the final stage of approval, and apparently you are the founder and director of that foundation." I simply nodded. "That's correct." He blinked. "So you're the Anderson on our investor list?" "Yes," I said. "I started the foundation in my late husband's name. We focus on community housing projects, and recently your company proposed a partnership." Harold ran a hand through his graying hair, exhaling slowly. "My God," he muttered. "I had no idea." I smiled faintly. "Most people don't." He chuckled nervously, clearly recalibrating his tone. "Well, this is incredible news. What a wonderful coincidence, Mrs. Anderson. Truly. We had no idea of your connection to Michael." "I gathered that," I said calmly. He looked at me for a long moment, searching for a sign of anger or humiliation. There was none, just quiet composure. "I want to apologize," he said finally, "for earlier. If anyone at the table—" "Mr. Grant," I interrupted gently, "there's no need. I've learned that silence is often louder than apology." He nodded, chastened, then asked carefully, "Will this change our arrangement in any way?" I thought about it for a moment, letting him stew in the silence. Then I smiled. "No, my board already approved the partnership. The work is important. I don't mix business with personal matters." Relief flickered across his face. "Thank you, Mrs. Anderson. You're a remarkable woman." "Yes," I said softly, "I am." When we stepped back into the banquet hall, the atmosphere had changed. Eyes followed us. Whispers began, spreading like ripples in water. Vanessa rose from her seat, trying to read her father's face. "Dad, what's going on?" Harold patted her shoulder, forcing a smile. "Nothing to worry about, sweetheart. Just a very important revelation." Michael looked between us, bewildered. "Mom?" I met his eyes and said, "We'll talk later, dear." Vanessa's mother gave a tight, nervous laugh. "Well, Olivia, it seems you've kept quite a secret." I smiled, serene. Some secrets are better revealed at the right moment. As dessert arrived, the tone of every conversation shifted. Suddenly, people who'd ignored me all evening wanted to speak. "Oh, Mrs. Anderson, I've heard wonderful things about your foundation." "I had no idea you were such an accomplished philanthropist." "Would love to connect sometime. Perhaps a coffee?" The same mouths that had laughed at me were now bending themselves into flattery. But I didn't gloat. I didn't need to, because true power doesn't shout. It radiates. Michael leaned close, his voice low. "Mom, what is all this?" "I told you, honey," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I built something after your father passed, something that mattered." Why didn't you tell me?" I smiled sadly, because I wanted you to be proud of who you were, not just who you married. He looked down, shame flickering across his face. Vanessa's fork clinked against her plate. She tried to smile, but her cheeks were pale. "Well, I guess we all underestimated you, Mrs. Anderson." I tilted my head slightly. "People often do." The table fell silent again. For the first time that night, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like the outsider. I felt like the storm in the middle of their perfect little world, calm, quiet, but impossible to ignore. When the dinner ended, Harold walked me to my car himself. He opened the door, thanked me again, and said with a nervous chuckle, "You've certainly made an impression tonight." I turned to him, smiling just enough to keep him uneasy. I wasn't trying to make one, but sometimes the Tolivia has its own way of introducing itself. And with that, I drove away into the night, the mansion's lights fading behind me, my reflection in the windshield steady and proud. For the first time in a long time, I felt like myself again, not the maid they saw, not the mother they ignored, but the woman they'd never see coming. When I woke up the next morning, the memory of that dinner felt like a dream, but the kind of dream that lingers in your bones. The phone started ringing before I'd even finished my coffee. First it was Michael, then Vanessa, then finally her father. I let them all go to voicemail. Some moments deserve silence, and silence, I've learned, is sometimes the loudest answer. By noon, there was a knock at my door. I didn't need to look through the window to know who it was. Michael stood there, still in yesterday's suit, tie loosened, guilt written across his face. "Mom," he said quietly. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. "You already are." He sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd taught him to do math, where he'd blown out birthday candles, where we talked about dreams once upon a time. Now he couldn't even meet my eyes. "Mom, I didn't know," he began. "About the foundation, the partnership, any of it." "I know," I said softly, stirring my tea. "You never asked." He winced. "That's not fair." "No," I interrupted, calm but firm. "What wasn't fair was standing beside people who mocked your mother and pretending you didn't hear it." He looked up then, eyes wet. "I froze, Mom. I didn't know what to do. I was embarrassed. Embarrassed by me?" He hesitated too long, and that pause told me everything. I leaned back in my chair. "You used to help me scrub diner floors after closing, remember? You'd stack chairs while I counted tips. You said, 'One day, Mom, I'll make enough money so you'll never have to work again.'" He nodded, tears spilling over now. "And you did, sweetheart," I said, voice softening just a touch. "But somewhere along the way, you forgot who taught you what hard work looks like." He reached across the table. "I'm sorry." I took his hand. "I know, but some lessons come too late to undo the moment." That evening, I received a call from Harold Grant himself. His voice was cautious, reverent even. "Mrs. Anderson," he said, "I want to personally apologize for how you were treated at the dinner. It was shameful, truly. My family was out of line." I let him talk. I could almost hear the boardroom tone in his voice, the tone of a man trying to repair a deal, not a heart. When he finally paused, I said quietly, "Mr. Grant, I don't hold grudges, but I do remember behavior, and I remember the look on your daughter's face when she called me sweet." He chuckled nervously. "Vanessa was just—" "I know exactly what she was," I said evenly, "and I hope she learns faster than her husband did." He cleared his throat. "Well, if you're still comfortable, we'd like to host a press event announcing the partnership next week. It would mean a lot to have you there as the face of it." I smiled into the phone. "Of course, Mr. Grant, I wouldn't miss it." A few days later, Vanessa herself called. Her voice trembled with rehearsed sweetness. "Mrs. Anderson, I just wanted to say how sorry I am if anything I said came off the wrong way." "If," I repeated softly. She stammered. "I mean, when we first met, I was nervous. I didn't mean to sound, dismissive. "Of course," I said, letting her twist in her own words. "Nerves make people show who they truly are." Silence on her end. Then weakly, "We'd love to have you for brunch soon. My parents, Michael, and I." "That's kind," I interrupted. "But I think I'll see you all at the event instead. That will be enough for now." That night, I sat by my window, looking out at the quiet street. My tea had gone cold, but I didn't mind. Forgiveness was a slow river. You couldn't rush it. And though they'd apologized, I wasn't doing this for revenge. No, my revenge was dignity. My revenge was composure, because they expected me to shout, to cry, to beg for respect. But I'd learned something much more powerful. When you stop demanding respect and simply embody it, the world has no choice but to bow its head. The next morning, the newspaper headline caught my eye. Grant Developments announces major partnership with the Anderson Community Foundation. We're honored to work with Mrs. Olivia Anderson, a pioneer in community development. Vanessa's smile beamed from one photo. Mine, quiet, composed, steady, beamed from another. She had power in her name, but I had power in my presence. And that, I realized, was something no amount of money could buy. The morning of the press event, sunlight poured through my window like a promise. I hadn't slept much, not because I was nervous, but because I could feel the weight of something shifting. For years, I had been quiet, invisible even, moving through life without demanding attention. But now the same people who once laughed at me were calling to confirm camera angles and sound checks. Funny, isn't it? How quickly people learn to pronounce your name once it's printed on a banner. When I arrived at the event, the hotel lobby buzzed with reporters, photographers, and investors. The backdrop read, "Grant Developments, the Anderson Community Foundation, building hope together." My name, Olivia Anderson, was written in elegant gold lettering beside theirs. A young PR assistant rushed toward me, tablet in hand. "Mrs. Anderson, so lovely to meet you. Right this way. We've arranged seating beside Mr. Grant and his family for the press briefing." Beside them. Not behind, not across the room. Beside. Harold Grant greeted me with a warm handshake, the kind that lingers too long to prove sincerity. "Mrs. Anderson," he said with a grin that almost reached his eyes, "you look absolutely radiant. Thank you again for being here. This partnership means a lot to us." I smiled. "I'm sure it does." Then came Vanessa, every inch of her wrapped in luxury, but her smile barely held together. "Mrs. Anderson," she said softly, her voice careful, "you look lovely today." "Thank you, dear," I replied, meeting her eyes. "So do you. The color suits you. Reminds me of humility." She blinked, confused, then looked away, pretending to fix her hair. As the event began, cameras flashed, lights blazed, and speeches flowed. Harold took the stage first, talking about shared values and collaborative vision, every word polished and safe. Then it was my turn. I stepped up to the podium, the microphone humming softly. "Good morning," I began, my voice calm but steady. "I'm honored to be part of this partnership. But before we talk about business, I want to talk about beginnings." The room quieted. I started my life working in a small diner. My husband and I served coffee, cleaned tables, and saved every dollar we could. When he passed, I didn't have much, just a dream and a lot of faith. But I built something small, and I built it with integrity. Because no matter where you start, what matters most is how you treat people on your way up. A hush fell over the room. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably. Her mother avoided eye contact. Harold gave a tight smile. That said, keep it light. But I continued. Sometimes, the world looks at people like me and only sees what we wear, where we come from, or how simple our lives look. But I've learned that the most powerful people are often the ones no one sees coming. The crowd broke into quiet applause. A few reporters nodded, scribbling notes. I smiled and concluded, so here's to building not just homes, but dignity. Here's to remembering where we came from, no matter how far we rise. After the event, cameras followed as we posed for photos. In every shot, Vanessa's smile trembled just enough to show the strain, and the next morning, headlines poured in. Olivia Anderson steals the spotlight at Grant Development's gala. From diner to donor, the woman redefining power. A lesson in grace. Olivia Anderson's words leave rooms silent. Suddenly, I wasn't just Michael's mother. I wasn't the maid. I was Mrs. Anderson, the woman behind the Grant partnership. Calls came pouring in from other companies, charities, journalists, but the most unexpected call came from Vanessa herself. "Mrs. Anderson," she said, her voice softer than ever, "I just wanted to say your speech was beautiful. You made a lot of people think." I smiled, though she couldn't see it. "Good. Thinking is a good place to start." Then she said something I didn't expect. "Would you maybe teach me how you built your foundation? I'd like to do something meaningful too." I paused. The old me would have doubted her sincerity. But something in her voice, fragile, uncertain, made me wonder if humility was finally finding its way to her heart. "Maybe one day," I said, "when you're ready to listen, not just talk." That night, I sat on my porch, watching the sun dip behind the trees. The crickets sang and the air smelled like summer again. I thought of my husband, of our diner, of the little boy who used to dream big in a world too small for his kindness. And I whispered to the quiet, "We did it, love. They finally see me." But the Talivia was, I didn't need them to see me anymore because I saw me. And that was enough. It's strange how quickly people's tones change once they realize who you are. A few months ago, I was sweet, simple, even embarrassing. Now I was inspiring, elegant, a woman of influence. But here's the thing about respect, the kind that truly matters. It's not the kind you're given when you walk into a room. It's the kind that stays when you walk out. After the press event, life slowed down again. I went back to my routines. Morning coffee, tending my garden, writing letters to the small business owners my foundation supported. But some things had changed. Michael started visiting again, not out of guilt this time, but out of genuine care. He'd show up. On Sunday mornings, help me fix the squeaky porch steps and stay for dinner. Sometimes we didn't talk much, but we didn't need to. One evening, he brought Vanessa. She stood in my doorway, not in designer heels this time, just jeans and a soft sweater, no makeup, no diamond earrings. "Hi, Mrs. Anderson," she said quietly. "I hope it's okay that I came." "Of course," I said, smiling. "Come in. Dinner's still warm." We sat at my old wooden table, the one that had seen decades of life, laughter, heartbreak, late-night studying, birthday candles. The lemon bars sat in the center again, golden and simple. For a while, conversation was cautious, safe, weather, work, a little small talk. But then, as Michael stepped out to take a call, Vanessa turned to me. "I wanted to tell you something," she said. Her voice trembled slightly. That night, at the first dinner, what I said, what my family said, it was cruel. I thought I was protecting our image, but really I was just protecting my own insecurities. I studied her for a moment. Her eyes, once sharp and cold, now looked softer, human. She continued, "I grew up thinking wealth made people better, but you showed me it's the opposite. It only makes people smaller when they use it to look down." I didn't interrupt. Sometimes silence does more than words. Finally, she said, "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I see you now, and I'm sorry." I nodded slowly. "Thank you, Vanessa. Seeing is a good start." Then I pushed the plate of lemon bars toward her. "Go on," I said. "Try one. They're not fancy, but they're made with love." She smiled faintly and took a bite. "They're perfect." That evening, after they left, I sat on the porch again, the soft hum of the night surrounding me. The moonlight touched the empty teacup beside me, and I thought about how life has a funny way of circling back, how pain can turn into peace if you let it breathe. People often ask me now, Mrs. Anderson, how did you forgive them? And I always say the same thing. Forgiveness isn't a gift for the other person. It's a door you open for yourself so you can step out of bitterness and walk back into light. A few weeks later, Harold Grant invited me to speak at a women's leadership conference. I hesitated at first, but then I thought, why not? Maybe one story could change another woman's life. On stage, I looked at the audience. Faces young and old, women who had been overlooked, silenced, underestimated. I told them my story, not with anger, but with gratitude. I was laughed at once, I said, but I didn't let their laughter define me. I let it remind me. The room was still. Respect, I continued, isn't about how loudly people applaud when you succeed. It's about how quietly you stand when they doubt you. Now, as I sit here sharing this with you, dear listener, I want you to remember something. The world might mistake your kindness for weakness. It might call your simplicity small, but don't let that fool you. Because true power doesn't need to announce itself. It simply shows up and stays steady. That's what I learned. That's what I became. They once said I look like their maid. Now they look at me like a mirror, one that shows them who they really are. And that, my dear friends, is what respect really means. Soft, reflective pause. I'm Olivia Anderson. Thank you for listening to my story. And if it found its way to your heart tonight, tell me where you're watching from. I love knowing where strong souls like you are listening in from. And remember, keep your head high, your hands kind, and your silence powerful. Because sometimes silence is the most beautiful sound of all.